Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kurt Chisholm, and I will be your host. So today I'm joined with Will Seipel. How you doing today, Will?
I'm doing fine, Kurt. How are you?
Good, good. Well, wanted to bring Will on the show. Wanted to mix it up a little bit. I think this will be a fun interview. Will, tell us a little bit about your background.
My background has been in quant head and statistics and economics, and I've gone in and turned around businesses for about 30 years for people from Halliburton to Soros, and finally decided I wanted to go work for myself. And I started this company called WorthPoint.
Nice. So you used to work for Soros?
Yes, I did. The Soros Group.
Oh,
I put his telecom properties together and made a business strategy out of them and took them public.
nice. That's awesome. Sure. Everyone's got thoughts about Soros. Maybe we'll probably keep those.
Well, I'll laugh and say I went from working for Dick Cheney to working for George Soros. So I saw both extremes.
Man of many talents, I would say.
I survived. That's what I'd like to say. I didn't go hunting with any of them.
I think that's smart. So what are you up to now? You were telling me earlier in the show, or before the show, that you're into the stuff business. So maybe you can describe to the listeners a little bit about what you do now and how that transpired.
Well, it's funny. When I was in college and I went to George Mason, I wanted to be a history major, but I couldn't figure out how I could make any money on it. And so I got into the dismal science of economics and later quantitative analysis, and found I was actually pretty good at it, but I didn't love it as much as it made sense to me. And keeping that passion of history alive and trading stuff along the way, I realized it was a very imperfect market, lack of information, and a huge amount of arbitrage, a lot of dark corners. And I kept that in my mind. And when I was approaching 50, I said, I think I can make a company with the technology that's going to be available over time, because I've always had worked technology into my companies, and that we can solve this conundrum of what something is and putting information together and creating a database out of it. And at the same time, eBay was becoming popular. And eBay was interesting because it took odd things that maybe there's 10 people in the world that would like it and brought them together into an efficient market where remote buyers and sellers found each other. And that was this genesis of my idea for building a Bloomberg type of system for the stuff business. And so well over $1 trillion a year of commerce operates in this business of leaving people's houses where all the good stuff is. It hasn't been discovered. Quite often it ends up in the trash dump, and but it's worth a lot of money. And trying to make it a more perfect market where people can learn, share information, share data. And eBay's been a good partner for us in that, with sharing their data with us. And that but it was a huge technology conundrum too. The amount of storage we use, the amount of images we have, billions of high-res images, and that we really are a technical company for the world's second oldest profession, and that it's very, very technology heavy for an industry that's been slow to adopt.
So just to kind of simplify, so basically you've created kind of technology like a database to price random miscellaneous stuff.
Yes. Okay. We have about prices of about 700 million items, about 700 auction houses to date contributing, mom and pop auction houses all the way up to eBay. And we have billions of images. We have selectively retained about 20 years of history from eBay, which is a lot of data.
It's a lot.
And that we harvest it, we improve it, we water it, feed it, do all kinds of things to put it together in artificial intelligence. We're really a company of nerds, both from a domain standpoint as well as a math standpoint. But it all goes back to your love for this stuff and saving things and making it a better hobby. But we kind of liken it to Zillow for your stuff. Uh, we have a product coming out late summer that's in beta now for archiving your home stuff and keeping the values updated and protected, and always be able to have a digital image of what it is you own and who you may want to give it to someday, or is it insured. But it's all about that stuff and the trillions of dollars of stuff in people's houses that sooner or later will end up in a marketplace or end up with another owner.
So I want to get into the archiving in a bit. But first, so I'm curious because eBay has obviously a lot of data. They've been around for a while. I guess they've been around for 20. Yeah, I guess they've been around for 20 years.
I've sold there for 23.
Yeah. So I guess the thing that comes up for me is, all right, so I go on eBay and I go search stuff, right? Whatever it is. And you get, the search function's okay, but people don't put stuff in right. Cause hey, I'll give you an example. I got a grandfather clock that I've had from, for my family, or a piano or whatever. I don't know anything about this thing. I don't know what the brand is. I don't know what the model is. Like, when I'm looking at a baseball card, I'm like, oh, it's a 1989 Topps, whatever, Ken Griffey or whatever it is. Like I know what that is, right? It's easy to kind of find that in some database that I'm looking at. But what about like stuff? Like, I don't know what this grandfather clock, who made it. I don't even know what to search for to find something similar. So how do you go about that, like in that stuff market?
Well, first, I would point out that the Griffey's not as easy as you say, because the grading condition is going to be hugely important.
Right.
And where a grade 10 could be worth 1,000 times a grade 1 or more. But in other things you get into, we have curated data and we have non-curated data that I would say that you can exclude in eBay, or you can exclude other companies that more have a homeowner listing. So you can go to a curated large auction house listing that's probably going to be a little more complete and accurate. But we're slowly implementing visual recognition to our database that will even tell you, oh, there's a product out today that I will hopefully blow past in the second quarter called CoinSnap, that you take a picture of any coin that's been produced in the world and it will allegedly tell you what grade it is and what coin it is. So the visual recognition is getting to be a very important part of everybody's database now that Google Lens had such a great product. But people are going beyond Google Lens with algorithms for visual ID. But for me, sometimes I'll go to our database, and we have a database on maker's marks, and I'll take a picture of a Native American Indian mark on the back of a ring, and our visual recognition product will tell you who made it. And I'll laugh and say, I don't know nothing about Native American jewelry marks, but all of a sudden I can become an expert with an iPhone in our database. And so you just have to realize, in one of my early jobs out of school, I think it was the third company I worked for, was the old Digital Equipment computing company up in your neck of the woods. And we had to, we were very aware of Moore's Law, and technology advances at 40% a year for the same price point. And all that is cascading into the user apps like WorthPoint, where you're giving more and more power to your user to figure those things out. If you would ask me that question 15 years ago, I would have said, I don't know. The technology will be here. Well, now it's starting to be delivered.
So, I guess the first question that comes to mind is, in any sort of inefficient market, once it becomes more efficient, it drives down the margins between the buyer and the seller. So what do you envision this technology doing to the stuff market, and is that a good or a bad thing?
Well, I think clearly, and I mean, people whined about eBay, it was putting antique stores out of business, and so be it. Maybe they'll go back in business with the price of postage. But I think it's really important to understand that a tool in everybody's hands, not an equal tool. So first off, whoever uses the tools the best it's going to create opportunities to make money. You know, I'll still go sniping in a lot of places, whether it's Facebook Marketplace, whether I love the two new products we brought on our auction houses, Caring Transitions and Max Sold, because they go right into people's houses and stuff comes out of people's houses. It's a great place to shop, not very curated. So I think it really depends on the strength of the user, but then having an eye that can detect some of the differences. We talked about a Griffey card. And if you have the eye to understand the difference in how a card would grade, there's a great opportunity there. So it drives up the price on scarcity. It drives up the price on condition, because you realize there's not a 10 Griffey card everywhere. And for those that use the tools well, it gives you an opportunity to make money better. But it does cut ignorance out of the market quite a bit. But, you know, if somebody's going to be stupid and not use the tools, I can't tell you how many people say, I can't afford WorthPoint. I can't pay for it. Well, you can pay for a year on one smart trade. You know, $300. I made that on a Mardi Gras medal I picked up at a flea market in Maine. I didn't know what it was except an old Mardi Gras medal. Went to WorthPoint, found it, sold it on eBay in a half an hour for over $300. I picked it up for a couple dollars in the flea market. You know, the most expensive thing I ever sold on eBay, and I sell in big auction houses, I sell on eBay. The most expensive thing I ever sold on eBay, the only place I could find the item was on WorthPoint. I put it into a 99-cent eBay auction and sold it for $27,000. Man, my wife thought I was crazy when I told her I was going to get $15,000. And the next day, starting from a 99-cent auction, I had somebody offering to send their chauffeur over with $15,000 in cash for it. And I let it go on a 7-day auction for $27,500.
Wow.
So, you know, you have to, just because you have a micrometer or something doesn't mean you know how to use it or use it well.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah. So is you know, the quote unquote stuff market, are there limitations on that, or is it anything like clothes, furniture is just, you know, like just like the Salvation Army or Goodwill's like a dumping ground for anything you don't want? Like, where are the limitations in the stuff market for you?
For me, I buy and sell everything. I used to joke I'd buy my mother back, you know, sell her if I could buy her back cheaper. But you know, you go into my eBay store, I have coffee mugs and I have $10,000 items. For example, a trove of Civil War papers from a soldier in a Maine unit. But to me, if you limit yourself to what you're willing to deal in, it doesn't provide a good payback on your time. If I'm going to an estate sale somewhere, which are places I love to hunt, and I say I'm not going to buy this, and this, and I'm only going to buy clocks. If they don't have a clock there, your whole trip is wasted. Or somebody snags the Ninja Turtles before you get in. Eric and I were at a Ninja Turtle estate sale that was packed with stuff, but I was number 12 in, and somebody got the Ninja Turtles before me. And you may laugh and say, why do you want Ninja Turtles? Well, he paid $40,000 for them. They were all new in their bubble packs, complete set. And he went out and flipped them, I imagine, for 6 figures. I don't know if I knew enough about Ninja Turtles, I would have paid 40 grand. It's a lot of money. But, you know, I try to learn. You know, the neat thing is, and I know I don't look it, but I'm almost 70, is that you can keep learning all the time in this business. And I love something where I go in and I learn every day. Wow, I didn't know that. And so for me, I try not to limit myself. I don't always make a good trade. You know, one I made recently, I thought these were Revolutionary War buttons, and they sort of were. They were cast in the original molds. And the maker that made them in the 1970s marked them on the back so you could discern them from original ones. And I didn't know about that marking adaptation, and I lost $2,000 on them. But I win way more than I lose, and I try not to limit myself.
So what about like liquidity? Because I know there's certainly on eBay, there are people who make a living on eBay just buying and selling stuff and arbitraging. And for those listeners who don't know what arbitrage is, basically just, buying and selling at different prices and realizing the inefficiencies in the market. But arbitraging that certainly requires an understanding of the market, because let's say you buy something, you're like, ooh, like something on eBay just sold for 40,000 in this item, and I have this item, but yet there was only one person in the world who wanted that. Now he has it. So how do you determine that because you can't be an expert in every market?
Well, first, I try to be, because I carry WorthPoint in my hand, right? So I have access to 700 million prices right in my hand. And I try not to show people that I'm looking on my cell phone while I'm shopping. But to me, you can move things into generalities. To give you an example, I know old paper, but I'm not an expert in rare paper. But I was in a flea market in Long Beach, and I saw some early ledgers. And I spent 30 years in New England, so I know an old ledger when I see an old ledger, but I'm not an expert in a lot of this stuff. And I quickly asked the dealer, where did you get these? And he said, well, there was this estate sale, and this big auction house came in, and I won't say who because I don't like to disparage anybody. And he said they took the signed first editions of Lawrence of Arabia and stuff, but they left the rest and they got tossed in the trash can. So that the dealer went and was dumpster diving to get them out, but the trash truck came. But there's 8 banana boxes that survived, Will. And so I said, Joe, let's buy them. Don't even know what's in them, but let's buy them. Because I got the ledgers home and some other stuff with it. And then I started doing my research. And I'm not afraid to gamble some money. One of those ledgers, they were all good. They were all from New Jersey. One of them was the first ledger from the colony of New Jersey Supreme Court. Where's the money? Now, I listed it on eBay, and I immediately had the New Jersey state government calling me. But imagine 8 more banana boxes of that stuff. And we're dealing with one schoolgirl book that we think is Bronte's book from when she went to school in Belgium, and her school teacher was her lover. And there's some awfully sweet notes in French on the back, and she refers to the school teacher who did the drawings in there, who was quite an artist, and it was a known affair. His second wife ended up he ripped up his love letter from Bronte from Wuthering Heights, and that he ripped them up and was going to burn them, and his second wife sewed them back together with their own linen paper, and thought they ought to be preserved for humanity. And it's nice to have such an understanding wife, but we're going to compare the handwriting, but I'm not an expert on this stuff, but you have a hunch. And one of the things I advise people is to buy in quantity. So we bought 4 of the 8 banana boxes. I couldn't get the other 4, but it turns out they were from a famous autograph dealer that lived in Beverly Hills that had moved out there from New York. And her family was in such a hurry to get the money out of the estate sale, they threw all the stuff in the trash because they wanted the value of the house. But one of the more interesting items I got out of the group was a autograph document from Edgar Allan Poe's father. And people don't realize that he was the first commissary general of the U.S. Army during the Revolution, and was an immigrant from Ireland, and nobody has his autograph. And we sold it to the Poe House in Baltimore. So there's, you have to be willing, and I say this is important, you have to be willing to gamble on yourself and take some knowledgeable guesses. But generally, when you buy in bulk, you can price average.
So but I guess it kind of comes back to the question of liquidity. Like, So you're basically, you're just buying, in many cases, you're buying in bulk, you're buying unknown, and you're hoping that you can find a market for it on the other side. So you might know the price through your app, but you don't know if there's a market there, right?
I can pretty quick pick up on the depth of the market with how many items they have that are in that somewhat related, and you can get to liquidity based on price. An example is in that lot, I have 8 shipping manifests from Kennebunkport from the early 1800s. Liquidity can also be defined on how low you want to price it. So if you average in on $1 an item, you can quickly get out at 100. It's a pretty good markup. If I want 200 for that manifest, it's going to take a lot longer. But what I try to do is go, when I buy in bulk, is to get my money out quickly, and the rest goes to storage, believe it or not. And I have a pretty full storage warehouse.
So why would you put it into storage? What's the purpose?
When I retire broke, my Social Security is not worth anything, I'll just go pull another piece out and throw it on eBay. But doing that part-time, I will tell you, I bring in over $10,000 a month part-time. And most of us could live on 10 grand a month.
So I guess the question would be is, why wouldn't you just liquidate all of it and sit in the cash, and then you could arbitrage bigger items?
I'm having fun supporting my lifestyle, doing exactly what I'm doing.
Okay. That's a good reason.
Don't need $1 million a month.
that's a good reason for sure.
My boat's paid for, and I told you I'm restoring my house over Ian, but the boat's paid for and it works, and it's in my backyard.
Yeah. So Will, you were just telling me you're selling something big out of your archive now.
I am. I held this one item for 30 years, and I enjoyed it, but I started realizing as you get older, you start coming to the conclusion you're not going to live forever. And so what do you do with some of this stuff? And one of my fun items was I had a real Mickey Mantle jacket, game jacket, and a lot of Yankee photos. By photos, I mean like Lou Gehrig, real silver gelatin photo. And one in particular, they only wore for one game as the Yankees, which was the 1938-39 World's Fair patch. These photos today can get into the tens of thousands of dollars. The Mickey Mantle jacket that I have, I got good documentation with it. He's giving it to the people I bought it from, which was his twin brother's coach in Commerce, Kansas, who was their baseball coach, with a signed letter from Mantle. I am giving this to them. Nice. I hope that will bring 6 figures.
Imagine it might. You can get 6 figures for his rookie card in mint condition. So why not that?
Yeah, well, the 52 tops one will bring 7 figures. And so to me, these are the things. I have a set of 52 tops I'm probably going to break up. But these are the things that lore is made of. And, I've enjoyed them in my life, but you start realizing, hey, I'm spending more time going out trying to catch a fish or something. I got an 18-foot boat that I stored after 9/11. I was at the Trade Center that day, and I put my new boat away, and I now got it back out. But, these are things that you say, I don't need anymore. Let somebody else enjoy them. And something that I'm going to start paying attention to is WorthPoint is creating the WorthPoint 500. You have the S&P 500. We're going to have the WorthPoint 500. And you and I ought to come back and talk about that sometime. But okay. We're creating, now that we have so much data in so many years, we're creating indices of things. So you can track and say, how is a Boba Fett 4-inch action figure doing in tracking its value over time? And we're creating indices with huge computing power that can do this.
So it's interesting because I think one of the trends we've started to see in the last 10 years is artwork, wine, certain things are being followed. People are creating indexes about them. I don't know the validity because I'm not in those space, but I know that it's happening and people are trying to legitimize and securitize a lot of alternative assets. So I think it's an interesting theme. I did want to ask you, because we want to talk about practical application, right? So let's say, I don't know, there's a hurricane that goes to your area and I got a house full of stuff. I know what it's worth. What if something happens to me and no one else knows what it's worth? Or what if a hurricane goes through and I don't know how to price this stuff? So how do you go about applying your knowledge in a more practical sense to people's lives?
I'm storing all my items in my virtual vault. An online vault where you can digitize it, put your memories and papers with it, track it to values and worth point. So you can track it to what's going through and what's being sold. And I would also encourage you, what I've learned, fortunately, my stuff didn't get wiped out. My house got wiped out. So with water saturation. And I got stuff out of there before it molded. But that I have a record of everything I had in there and exactly what it is. And they'll try to tell you a remediator, they have this little camera that will oscillate around your room and tell you what stuff is. All right, well, I got a bookshelf full of books. And I love first edition books. I love autographed books of things I'm interested in. Like the town I lived in, Kennebunkport, Kenneth Roberts, the fictional writer was there, wrote A Rabble in Arms, Northwest Passage. I would collect first edition signed books of his. I also have a painting he painted for Booth Tarkington, the artist. But I have all that detail in there. If you just take a picture of a bookcase, it doesn't tell you anything other than you have a lot of books in there, and maybe they're worth $5 a piece. But no, if you have a first edition and a signed copy, and you have a picture of it in there, you have your vault, you can say it's worth $500 because I can look it up on WorthPoint, and I have it tied to values. Now, the other side you need to do is to make sure your insurance policy reflects what you have in your house. And what I learned is it didn't. So now that I got a second life, I can promise you it will next time. And when I moved out of my house in Maine, it was in January, wasn't a good time to have an estate sale. I took everything down to the Habitat for Humanity, but documented it with images, documented it when in the store or on their truck, got comparables, printed them right off of WorthPoint, put it in my tax return, and supported my donation. I never had any questions from the IRS. And by the way, I know the IRS uses our database because they're a customer. And so these are really important things you need to do is document. Now, we're going to try to make the vault a lot more fun because somebody told me, Will, you won't be able to get anybody to do that much work. Well, that's what it used to be when I used to use York barbells in my basement and I was in high school football. But now Nordic Track makes it a lot of fun to exercise in the basement. And we're going to do it when you add an item to the WorthPoint vault, you'll see your worth score go up. How much is your bobblehead collection worth? Or how much is your book collection worth? How much is your total collection worth? And make it fun for you.
So got a few questions there. You mentioned storing digital storage and the IRS in the same sentence. So I guess the natural question is if you store your stuff there, is the IRS going to see it?
Not from us.
Okay. Well, I had to ask because I know someone in my list.
Everything is secure here. We don't even sell information about what you're looking at. So, what goes on at WorthPoint stays at WorthPoint.
So one thing that comes, and the reason I asked it originally is because my parents had a house fire way back, and I went through the process of having to go through every single item, detail over and over, and there was like a hundreds of pages worth of stuff had to be itemized, and that process took a long time. And of course, the prices were questionable from all of them, right? You just kind of work through it. You're like, all right, here's what it's worth. And there's so much stuff. You're just doing that over and over again. So I guess the question I would ask is, so there's security of your info and data. Is that true? Or
Yes.
what's the security look like on the data?
It is totally secure behind our firewalls,
Okay.
and we don't let anybody else in it. You can make it public if you want to. You can share it with people if you want to, but that's totally up to you. We'll also be letting you put videos in there. With my oldest son, who's married, asked me to go through his house and make a video on each item that we had given him and what was the tie to the family or where did I get it. But that's privately yours, and it's not shared unless you want to share it. And so we're building it with the aspect of security to begin with. And we're a pretty buttoned down company in regards to technology, and it's your private information.
So so the question comes up, you mentioned kind of the video, and it kind of brings up the concept of legacy, right? So you're basically tracking all your stuff. So something happens to you, you know, your heirs or whoever can come in and at least know what's there and know the price of things. Because I know this is a problem too. If one person is dealing with all of the stuff or the pricing of stuff, and then that person dies, everyone else is clueless. That person may be like, you know, a baseball card collector and be like the foremost expert, and then the spouse is like, I don't know what that's worth. And then somebody comes in and says, yeah, I'll buy it all for like $200. And they're like, all right, sounds like a deal. Right? You've got this dispersion of information. And so I guess, how does this play into the concept of legacy? Like, how can people utilize this in a way that's going to not only track it, but also help, you know, the survivors and maybe passing on a legacy of videos and other things?
Well, I think it's important. I mean, you know, I discussed this with again, I'm not going to say who, but a high wealth advisory group that doesn't take you in their group unless you have $50 million of liquid assets. So they weren't discussing with me about being a customer because I don't have that. But I was discussing with them why they needed the product for their customer base. And I asked the rep, I said, look at my watch. It's a Rolex. You wouldn't immediately identify it's a Rolex because it's an old Rolex. What do you think it's worth? And because it's an old Rolex, it's light. It's not like those heavy ones today. I didn't want one I was going to get killed for when I bought it. And he says, well, I don't know. Is it real? And I said, yeah, Joe, I will promise you it's a real Rolex. He says, I don't know, $10,000. And I said, Joe, you should know better. You're a wealth advisor. You've dealt in coins. He sold the King Farouk $20 gold piece. I said, this is a bond model from the late 1950s. You're off by at least a digit. So one day, I promise you, I'm going to die. You're handling my estate. You just let this out for at least $90,000 too cheap. My kids are doing a happy dance because they got $10,000 for dad's watch. You know, they're going to go buy something when they get the money. And you just screwed the estate out of 90 grand. But I'd love to have that in my vault with the story about how I got it and where I got it. It came off the wrist of a guy in Brimfield, Mass, you know, the flea market, that he had it on. A watch dealer that was a friend of mine saw it, knew I wanted a nice Rolex, and he bought it and flipped it to me for $8,000. It's gone up over time. Probably was a good buy to begin with. And I have that story in the vault for my kids. And if they want to sell it, that's their decision. You know, I don't care. And but at least they know what it's worth, and it's archived in there with a story. And if they wanted to, ultimately they'll be able to pass that storage bin off to the person that buys it to put it in another WorthPoint vault. And having that provenance, or just my kitchen table that's beat to hell, that was my parents bought when they got married. It's a trestle table that's about 2 inches thick, 8 feet long with drop leaves. It would probably cost $5 grand to replace it. An estate sale is worth about $400, but I'm putting it in the vault with pictures of me eating there with my parents. And one of my daughters wants it, even though it's all beat up. It's fun looking. It's now starting to look like an antique, and it's sturdy. But having that history there with it is just real exciting to me.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's so important when we get into the concept of legacy to, most people think of legacy, they think of money. Like that is the number one thing people focus on. Oh, or have you thought about legacy? Yeah, I'm not sure where my money's going to go. I'm like, no, your legacy is a lot more than money, isn't it? Like, it's the stories you've had in your life. It's the adventures. It's the stuff you've acquired and what it meant to you. Like, there's so much more to people's lives than just money. But that's all people focus on. Like we had a guy a while ago who's in his 90s and was in World War II and never wanted to share the experience with anybody because it was kind of a horrible period for pretty much anybody who's over there. But he never wanted to share when he came home. Like he didn't tell anybody because he didn't want anyone to experience what he experienced. And then said, you got to share this. You got to like. So we videotaped him for his heirs and said, we started asking him questions and just interviewed him and just got it all on tape. So at least he could pass that along. He wasn't comfortable doing it, but at least he did it so that his kids could have that experience and say, wow, now we understand. It's so powerful, like stuff like this. So I'm really glad you're doing this because it's something that most people don't think about. And of course there's arbitrage. But I think outside of that, just the family legacy is just a really important aspect here.
Well, it's funny if you go back to the beginning of WorthPoint, the very beginning, me being a digihead, thought about the arbitrage and the monetary aspect. One of my mentors who was on my original board had a PhD in psychology, and he was the dean of George Mason's business school. And he convinced me otherwise, that the legacy and the provenance and story was just as important as the digitizing arbitrage. And I look here in something I have in my room and here in my office, and I don't talk much about why it's here, but I have a pair of combat boots, and those were my dad's from Vietnam. And my dad was in special ops over there with three one letter started with a C and the other ends with an A. And he was never there, but he was also a World War II vet, and he was overrun. And that, for me, it's something to tie me back. And just when I was cleaning out my mom's stuff, after I finally had the courage to deal with it 5 years after her death, I found the only picture I ever found of him from World War II in uniform. And so it's kind of interesting for me to keep that legacy for myself, but then for my family, my kids, about you won't find much about him being in Vietnam. The government claims he was never there, but keeping things like his passport, his officer's army cap, and some of that stuff that he had, helps preserve that in the legacy. And I think that's more important than money. I mean, he was a civil servant, he didn't have much. So you look at that and say, this is really what grounds you to your past and who you are. And I think that's the huge mission for WorthPoint. And to me, that's probably emotionally to me more important than looking at that. Yeah, we're creating a really cool Bloomberg machine or system that will keep track of things, but it's more emotional than that.
Yeah. Well, Will, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your wisdom with us. This has certainly been eye-opening for me, and I think all the listeners will appreciate this as well, as this is one of those topics that no one wants to talk about. It's like talking about insurance, death, just any sort of transitions. People just kind of it's a struggle. So I really appreciate you coming on. Where can people find more about you and WorthPoint?
Come on to worthpoint.com, and really important, WorthPoint, one word. And you can start finding out about what we're about. I think we're getting better and better at describing it. It's a little bit overwhelming. The beta application is open. If you're a paid member, you can be a paid paid member for as little as around $250 a year or something, or you can pay for it by the month. And we're going to have a special vault product out, as I said, in the third quarter that will run about $200 a year. And you can keep all your stuff archived in there. And one person best described it, which I think is a good way. It's ancestry.com for your stuff. You know, that's it in a nutshell. And so there's a point where you can focus on worth point if you just want values and you're out flipping. We're by far the largest, about 300,000 mobile users use us a day. On the other hand, the vault and the legacy is going to be a whole different side of the story.
Nice. Well, really appreciate you coming on the show, Will. We'll probably have you come back on the future with your other endeavors once those are launched as well.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. You mean like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider, or in the room as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room. All right, well, that was a great episode with Will. Really appreciate him coming on the show. And now we're on to the panel portion of the show. And just like to remind our listeners that this is episode number 500, not 100, 500. We're after 500, you think I could get it right. So at episode 500, we wanted to bring back a legacy to the show, which is Miranda Marquardt. Hey, Miranda.
Hey, thanks for having me back. It's fun to be here. It's fun to listen, see what's going on, and it's fun to see Barb again. It's fun. Hi Douglas. Nice to meet you. I don't know if we've met before.
Well, we wanted to bring Miranda back. We wanted to kind of talk through some of the history of the show, but first wanted to also introduce our very own Doug Hagren. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Kirk, how you doing? You know, listen, I just want to clarify. It's 100 shows, but 5 times better. So.
5 times the love. And we also have our very own Barb Freeberg. Hey, Barb.
Good day, everyone. Happy to be here for 500.
Well, let's kind of dive right in, because I wanted to, before we get into the episode, I really wanted to dive into, we've had 500 episodes. It's been a lot of history. We're one of the longest running financial investing in personal finance podcasts out there. I don't know if we're the longest, but if we're not the longest, we're one of the longest running shows.
We got to be close.
yeah. I don't know when it's. I think it started in 14. I think it was, Miranda.
Yep. 2014.
Yeah, that's a long time. So let's start with you, because you're one of the legacy panelists, guests, hosts, all of it. What were some of your takeaways from 500 episodes? What were some of your learnings from the podcast?
Oh, I think one of the things that has always been most interesting to me is that there's always something new to learn, right? Because you would think by now everything's been covered and there's nothing else to learn, but here we are. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about, well, just doing podcasting in general, but also finance, because there's always something else. There's always something new to learn. There's always something you can take away. And even if it's a concept you're familiar with, there's always a new way of looking at it. And so I think that's one of the biggest things is being willing to be open and find a new angle to something, and also be willing to learn even just a little bit more.
Nice. Barb, what about you? What were some of your takeaways from your history on the show, and what are some of your favorite things?
The field just keeps growing, expanding. New fintech apps keep emerging. We've got so many different ways to invest, and it just keeps continuing to grow. From your traditional stock and bond and mutual fund investing, now you've got an app to invest in artwork, for goodness sake. The guest we're going to talk about today is actually investing in collectibles. And yeah, you know, that was always a thing, but now it's even more of a thing. So the thing that just astounds me is week by week, month by month, people are securitizing into apps, into websites, ways to grow your wealth.
Awesome. Doug, what about you? What are some of the things that some of your favorite things about the show?
I think, Kirk, one of the things that I've kind of taken away from the show is that, the world of investing isn't what it used to be, right? I mean, it used to be very, very, I don't think it was ever simple, but it was simplified. In the fact that it used to be back in the day, the only ways to invest was to go through a market maker, go through a broker, pay a commission, buy some stocks, and they kind of came out with mutual funds, and there was, kind of the ways that you could go about it. I mean, if anything, over the last, 10, 15 years, the incredible amount of new options and accessibility that has now come out there through digital technology, through other means, you don't have to go through the middleman anymore, but it's opened up a number of incredible things that people can now use to invest. It's also opened up a lot of things that can make things much worse for people if you don't know what you're getting into. So I think I think one of the valuable things about this is it talks a lot about what is now out there that was never accessible to the public before. It talks about it helps people to really get educated about the forces that are out there that are working with them and against them, and how to really maneuver through this and just kind of cut through a lot of noise and a lot of incredible information to really understand, hopefully, to be educated just a little bit more about how and which ways these things can work for you, but also avoid some of the traps and pitfalls that can come from all these new shiny bells and whistles that unfortunately, can also create a lot of chaos in people's lives too. I mean, when it comes down to it, we all know savings and investing is the simple basic. Let's do it. All of these wonderful ways you hear about people making money, but what is the truth behind the truth, right? We talk about half truths and things like that. And I think that kind of education hopefully will help people to be able to be better positioned, but also to be able to avoid mistakes.
Yeah, that's great. So Miranda, I want to jump back to you. So, you have the longest history on the show here. So, I mean, sorry to remind you that.
You make me sound like this ancient person, just like floating back to the office after.
Welcome back, Sensei.
When the student is ready, the master will appear.
Or
for 500 episodes.
or she's ready to go. Just fade back into the background. Either way.
So I wanted to ask Miranda, I mean, you've been a part of the show the longest. What are some of your favorite moments or favorite episodes that you kind of look back on and say, wow, that was really kind of eye-opening or interesting?
Okay, this is gonna be bad. but I really enjoyed, we had laugher on, like the inventor of the laugher curve. And I came prepared with all sorts of research from Chicago. And we all know that the University of Chicago's like business and economics stuff is not exactly considered the most liberal out there. But I came prepared with a bunch of their stuff that was basically like, yeah, the Laffer curve doesn't work. And so like I came with receipts. I came with all of the stuff like, yeah, no, like, yes, tax cuts do work, but you have to give the tax cuts to the poor people, not the rich people. Like that's what the research shows. And that's from Chicago, you guys. That's from University of Chicago. And they are not well known in their business department and their economics department for like being the most progressive people on the planet. And the hate mail that I got, the hate mail that I received after that episode, that was probably my favorite. It's fun. It's good times. We love it. We love to see it. They're like,
Nice.
how could she say these things? She didn't have anything to back it up. Like, what are you talking about? I literally prefaced everything I had with research, and we have goddamn footnotes. Oh, am I allowed to swear on this anymore? I don't know. Anyway,
Probably not, but that's okay.
In 2023, damn is no longer considered a swear
bleep it
word.
out. Bleep it out. Just bleep it
Yeah,
out, Steve.
yeah,
It'll make
and-
it more fun. It'll make it more fun.
We'll go pull up some of those old comedic videos of George Carlin where he tells you the words you can't say, and that wasn't one of them. So I think you're good.
That's right. Okay,
I was actually just
fantastic.
going to quote that. Yeah, the George Carlin. Yeah, I don't even want to say them because I'm not even sure. I
7
think they're
words
all
you
allowed.
can't say on TV.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
they're now
yeah.
allowed, right? I think they're all allowed. Well, that's awesome. So Barb, what about you? Any kind of favorite moments or episodes that you kind of say, wow, this was a lot of fun?
When Meb Faber was on from Cambria Funds,
Yep.
I was really, this is going to sound so boring, but I was really fascinated by the analyses that he did to choose his stocks. He used some he included stock buybacks in his analysis to create valuations. It used several new types of metrics that I had never heard of. So the learning of that that I was exposed, someone who's invested for like forever, to a new method of stock valuation was just really educational for me. So I loved that. Does that mean his company, his funds are absolutely the best and outperforming? I'm not going to say they are or they aren't, but he's got a strategy that is really smart, innovative, and has a lot of research behind it.
Yeah, I concur. Meb was a great interview. He's one of my favorite quants for sure.
Yeah. Do you remember what his actual analyses were? Because
The CAPE ratio, the
metrics, the valuation metrics that he used. And I would, if I known you were going to ask me this, I would have been better prepared to refresh my memory.
I think he does the Schiller CAPE ratio. He does the rolling CAPE ratio. But
Yeah, but there was a lot more into it. He looked at a lot of different, like he incorporated in stock buybacks.
Oh, that, yeah, no, that. So I know what you're talking about. So that actually is, if you look in What Works in Wall Street, it's like an encyclopedic book of like, famous people that their strategies have worked. And I forget who authored that, but basically the book just goes into all these different methods. And one of the methods, Meb talked about way back, he said, I found it in this book and he added to it. And it's basically companies, in one of his funds, SYLD is based on this. It's basically dividend stocks that are growing their dividends, they're buying back shares, and they're paying down debt. So it's like all of the what are the great things you can do with free cash flow? And the analysis was, if you look at these three things, what are the best performing companies? Well, the best performing companies are doing these three things. They're taking their cash flow and they're using it in a smart way. And that's how he runs his fund. And I thought it's a brilliant analysis of, if you're looking for value stocks, I thought he did a great job with it. So I concur with that.
Thank you for flushing out my very lame initial description.
No, I think it was great. I think it was great, Barb. I mean, like I said, I caught you a little off guard, and we didn't do much prep for this. We're just kind of shooting from the hip, so no worries. Doug, what about you? What are some of your favorite episodes or moments on the show?
Well, spending time with you, Kirk. I mean, obviously,
Thanks, Doug. That's so
more than
sweet.
and Barb and Megan and meeting new people and and tech issues have definitely been my favorite times on the show. I mean,
but that's every episode.
I am never bored with that piece of it. No, I would say, I haven't been on near as many shows as most of the people on here have. The one that stands out to me, and you're gonna have to help me with who that was, Kirk. It's been a while, but the gentleman that I think he's located in Thailand, and he was talking a lot about kind of some of the international components.
Andrew Stotts.
Was that what it was? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I really appreciated, again, some of what he says could controversial. It's his opinion. It's his take, as many of these are. And certainly could get a little bit into some of the controversial geopolitical takes. But I think, a lot of what he was talking about, you're seeing it play right now. You're seeing it when when we hear about, the concern of the dollar being dropped, from the oil, from the main currency for oil trading. You're seeing the relations between China and Russia solidify, and now you're starting to see India get involved with that, and now OPEC getting involved with that. I mean, I think from the aspect of just not just an opinion on where to invest or what to do, or my product is really, really cool. Which a lot of, let's face it, a lot of people are really just touting what they have built and how wonderful and special that is. I think it was one of the best conversations about what is really going on and influence economically, what the change that we're seeing. And ultimately, he wasn't there to sell. He wasn't really selling anything. It was more about, listen, understand that this has become a global world. Kirk, you and I talked about this a little bit earlier this week on the other podcast that we did. I mean, back in the day, there was a lot of people that believe that one of the greatest things that created stability in an ironic way was the Cold War. Right. Because you had two superpowers, and you really didn't want to hate either one of them, because that would give all the power to the other side. And at that time, it was really easy to hate the Soviet Union. It was the greater of two evils. What has happened over the last 30 years is that the Soviet Union collapsed. It's no longer viewed the power. We went to Afghanistan the same way that the Soviets did, and ran into the same problems that the Soviets did. And now guess what? We're top dog. And when you're top dog on that mountain, you are a target for everybody below. We see that in every walk of life, right? Anytime someone makes it, there's plenty of trolls there to try to take them out at the ankles. And that's where we're at right now as a nation. And so with that being the case, when you start looking at the GDP of the United States versus the GDP of the rest of the world, now it is, if they can align and they can coordinate, then it creates a completely different dynamic for the United States going forward. I don't think it means the collapse of the United States, but I certainly think it has a lot. It makes you have to be aware of how things, are going to change with a new reality going forward. And I thought his view of that was probably, if you look at what's going on right now, one of the more profound conversations that I've heard with this show.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it was a great interview. I'm going to go through a few. I've got, it's hard for me to just have one, but I want to name a few, because I think the ones that have been named so far are great. Some of my favorites, Vic Spariando was one of the Wall Street Wizards interviewees. And he was making like 70% returns a year on average with no down years. Like, this guy, this is back in the day. This is, talk about history. This is back in the day when you could do things you can't do now. But great interview. Love that one. Another one of my favorites, Doug Casey, just because he's so out there. Like, he came, and some people may disagree with him. We got a lot of hate mail after having him on the show.
That's always a good sign, Kirk.
It is a good sign.
Hate mail is what feeds your soul.
You're absolutely, that means people are engaged. People are listening, and when you can get them riled up.
Hate mail means they care.
Absolutely.
Is that what trolling's all about, Miranda? I'm not doing it
Yes.
right.
I
need
mean, I've been a woman on the internet for 20 years. I mean, I know all about how the hate mail is care.
It's like Jerry Maguire. You had me at I'm a woman. As soon as you mention that, the entire world's going to blow up on social media, especially now, and we're not going to go there.
Yeah, we'll try to stay off the politics, Doug, as much fun as that would be. But you know, Doug Case, who's talking about how he wanted to buy a country. Like just the, you know, like we talk about things in the show, it's about expanding your mind, expanding your thinking. Like who would have come up with something like that? That's cool, right? Whether you agree with his politics or not, it doesn't matter. Like that's a cool idea, right? Danielle DiBartino Booth, she used to work for the Federal Reserve and gave some insight into what goes on there, which I thought was great. You know, there was one with Rob Arnott, which talked about the pension crisis. One of my favorites as well. We got tons of great YouTube views on that one. That one is timeless for the next 10 years when it actually becomes reality. But that was a great interview. We also had one with Tom Sosnoff, which he started. I can't remember the name of it, but he basically started Thinkorswim. Tastyworks, that's what it was. Tastyworks and Thinkorswim. We had him debate. Some of my favorite ones were actually the debate. So he debated Rick Ferry. So Tom Sosnoff is an active investor and Rick Ferry is very much a passive investor. And we had them debate, and it was a very professional debate. It wasn't crazy. People weren't throwing chairs like Jerry Springer, which actually probably would have made for good video, but that didn't happen. But it was a very well thought out and intelligent debate. Everyone was very professional, respectful. I thought that was awesome. We also had another debate of gold versus Bitcoin. It was a 4-person debate. I was on that. We had a lot of fun. We did that also at Freedom Fest. So we did that in front of a crowd of a few thousand. Like it was a lot of fun. That was with Paul Rosenberg. It was with Erica Gemma and Rick Chekin. Brilliant people, just really very knowledgeable people. We also had some other ones. I love the one with Richard Duncan on macroeconomics. I know that puts people to sleep, but I thought he was a lot of people really loved that episode too. So, and also, let's see who else I loved. Michael Sonnenfeld, just a great insight into family offices and ultra high net worth families, just to show that they're normal people too, even though they have abnormal problems, but they also have problems. They're not, you know, sitting on a yacht is maybe a different kind of problem. But what he talked about was some of the challenges about transitions and raising kids right when you're surrounded by money. So, you know, everyone has problems, right? They're just different problems. So I thought it was really fascinating to get some insight into some of these challenges that people have. So I thought that was a great interview. And one of my favorite ones recently is Annie Duke. As I told her on the show, I'm a fanboy of Annie Duke and her work. She writes brilliant books about the psychology of investing and the psychology of people. And I thought, you know, her stuff is just brilliant. If you haven't read her stuff, read it. You're going to learn more about the markets, even though it's not necessarily about the markets. You'll learn more about the markets from those books probably than any other book. It is just great work, and I really appreciate her coming on the show. And I missed a lot of other people. A lot of other great people have been on the show, but frankly, if you listen to those episodes, those are some of my personal favorites. But you know, if you go back and listen to episodes, I would definitely recommend the listeners go back and listen to some of the history. There's just some great stuff from all the way back to 2014, and you know, I don't even remember half of them, but there's go ahead.
I was just gonna say the very first episode is the one where they interview me. I'm the very first episode, so
that is probably
back.
one of the more popular ones. People always love listening to the first episode, Miranda. So yeah, if you haven't listened to that one, so go back and listen to that one. I'm not. I you know, I think it's great. That's not my opinion. That's what the stats say. That's what Libsyn says. That's what everybody listens to. So it's great, you know. But we've had a lot of great guests on the show, and we're going to have a lot more great ones lined up. We've got a huge number of people lined up, and we also have some new panelists coming on the show, which I'm really excited about because, you know, we wanted to kind of mix things up and get some different personalities. The panelists on are still staying on; they're not going anywhere. But I just wanted to let people know we're adding some new personalities because some topics we really just wanted to get more depth on and really wanted to kind of vary it up. So I have to say, I really love the fact that we've had a full 500 episodes. and we're shooting for the next 500, and really excited for what this show has come from its origins to where it is now and where it's going. And I just want to thank all the listeners, because we couldn't do it without the listeners. And if you have feedback that you want to provide the show, we always like feedback. Even the trolls, send your trolling feedback. We listen to that too. We may not like you
Even
as much.
the Karens, when we get the Karens in the chat section. That, by the way, that is a running joke from another podcast we did, where one of the only person that was going back and forth with us for the entire hour was Karen. So which was pretty funny. And by the way, Kirk, if you want to fire me and give me the $1.6 million per year for the next or per month for the next 20 months, like Tucker Carlson, I'm in. I'm happy to walk away. I'll sit on the bench silent. You can do your thing and just keep the checks coming. Of course, I have yet to get the first one, so I don't. Maybe there's some back pay there.
Yeah, don't go away mad, just go away, right, Doug?
Absolutely. That's an easy way to make me not go away mad, for sure.
Yeah, no, the running joke Doug was talking about, if you haven't listened to it, was a live episode we did on LinkedIn and YouTube, where there was a woman whose name was Karen, and she was acting like a Karen. And the funny part was Doug and I didn't even realize her name was Karen, and it lined up until the end. We're like, oh, we could have made some good jokes on that. But anyway, but let's get to the interview as well here, because I think the interview with Will was really interesting, and I don't want to totally ignore that, but even though it's the 500th episode. So what I thought was interesting about that, and I want to kind of get the panelists' opinions, which is, you have this big challenge, which is when, what he talked about was a solution for, when families pass, and when, people have to go through the house, or when there's a flood, or when there's accidents, and just having like inventory. But it's the whole idea of just, looking through your life and trying to organize a little bit better. So Barb, kind of what were some of your thoughts from the interview, and kind of takeaways people should think about?
You want the truth, or you want the the public version?
We don't want you to lie to us, Barb. That's why we got you in the show. We want the truth.
There's 7 words you can't use other than that.
Either way you slice it, all of what he talked about is a lot of work. So he talked about, first of all, organizing what you have that is of value, that the people in your life, that your heirs, they may not know about it. And then the other part of what he taught, and he's got a website that helps you do that, and he's coming out with a new product that will actually be a tool for people to control their items, their legacy, and put it in one place for your heirs, or even for yourself. So that's a great tool. What I'm thinking in the background is that is so much work. I can't even clean off my desk. And then
I was just gonna say, but I think anytime you put together something like that, I have a friend who put together a death book for whatever. I think whenever you have anything like that, it's going to be a lot of work. But I would imagine once you put the work in, once you start updating it, it's much easier to keep updating it, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I've been working on because I handle all the finances for my family, and have access to everything, and nobody else knows anything about it or where it is. And so I've been working on putting this together in an organized fashion, so when I bite the dust, it's not going to be like a huge where the hell is everything game. Of course, I've been working on this for years because it never gets first priority. So that's a whole nother topic. And then he talked about collectibles. And this part I found really fascinating, because my husband is a huge collector, and he's got a lot of memorabilia, and I'm sure it's worth a lot. And this guy does a lot of buying and selling of memorabilia on a whole variety of different topics and areas. And that's another investment opportunity, which I think is viable for many people.
Yeah, No, I totally concur, Barb. It's kind of like it's great if you've done it when something happens, but it's never a priority. It's always last thing on the list, like cleaning your desk. And if you saw mine, you'd know that I concur with Barb. It's never clean, but I know exactly where everything is. Doug, what about you? What were some of your takeaways from it?
Well, I think, I think besides the time, I think the one thing he has in this, and I think this is where this could be valuable, is, you have to have a passion. You have to, it has to be something you actually want to do. I mean, going out and it's like the American Pickers thing. He's like, I found this one thing and I made this investment on it. I was able to flip it. I think there's a couple things I took away from this. And number one is, obviously, if you have a passion in collection, tools, and, and this is something that you're going to do and you have the time to do, tools like this can be very valuable as long as they're accurate. And I think there's always question where you're getting your information from. I mean, Zillow was considered the end all be all of real estate valuations until they couldn't sell their own properties for the values they thought they were worth, right? And now we're heading into a different change of the economy and market where money, listen, I grew up with baseball cards, for example, and, they were amazing. We all traded them, and yeah, you get values. And I used to have the books and look up how much these old cards would be worth, and then they weren't valuable anymore, right? And all of a sudden, nobody collected them. Now I'll come to find, and I really didn't stumble into this until about a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I was having lunch with someone at a conference, and he was talking about, these sneaker clubs, where it's, and I always knew there was a passion for like the Nike Air Jordans. I mean, I knew that was out there. I didn't realize that there was a market of arbitrage going on these, and that these people were not just collecting them because they thought they were cool. Like in the show Blackish, he's got his entire closet just for, his Air Jordans, but literally collecting these things and buying and selling and trading them online. And I was like, what? But, we've seen a lot of this over the last, several years, because again, the economy was driven by low interest rates, an incredible influx of money. And whenever you get that, you get a lot of money that people want to invest and burn and buy things, and it's cheap, and you can flip things, and you can arbitrage, and you can flip houses. You know what? That may have been fine and dandy. My question is, what's going to happen in the years to come? Now that money supply is going down, and there's still a ton out there, but not necessarily to they say a sucker's made every day or every minute or whatever the word is. Not necessarily all the people that used to be the buyers of the stuff are going to have the money anymore. Maybe the top wealthy are. So what is the arbitrage market going to now look like on this? Are we going to see a significant reduction of the opportunities and valuations that you can get by these collectibles? Now, I know that the young wealthy, and I saw an article today, a lot of them are disenfranchised with the stock market. They're putting their money into things like artwork, and they're putting in collectibles and things like that. I think there's still going to be a market there, maybe in the private equity space and that. But is it necessarily going to be an area where people are just going to be able to go out, find collectibles and flip? And even if you can, go back to what kind of time do you have? Even in real estate, one of my first questions to families were getting into real estate was, do you want to be a landlord? Well, not really. Okay. Well, then you got to think about it. How much do you really want to get into this? Because you can invest in real estate in a number of different ways, but do you really want to take the time to research the market, manage the tenants, all the stuff that goes into it? Same thing with collectibles. Do you really want to have the time or take the time to make this your life? And if you don't, then I don't know if this is necessarily going to be the right thing for you. And even if it is, I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the market as this, this world, this economy that we've been living in for the last decade is coming to a very abrupt shift.
Yeah. Well, let's see, as we kind of wrap it up here. So Miranda, what are some final thoughts you can leave us with here? I know you didn't get access to the episode beforehand, so a little bit of a scheduling snafu here, but yeah, what are some of your kind of final thoughts you can leave us with for this 500th episode, and some takeaways for listeners?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the important thing is planning, right? This allows you, I like this idea of this tool that puts it all in there. You can put it all together, you can see where you're at, and you can let the people who will be following you access that anyway. But I think it's really important from a planning perspective, and whenever you're working with money, whenever you're working with finances, it's important to plan and to think ahead. The idea of what Doug was saying about, well, people are looking for these other ways to make money. And even if you're, when we're talking about diversification and planning, I think we talk about income sources. Have you diversified your income sources? Do you know where your money's coming from? Do you have a plan for what happens when one of those sources dries up? Are you prepared with an emergency fund? Are you prepared? This goes back to another one of my favorite episodes that we did was about, how do you prepare for the apocalypse? Right? Are you ready for the apocalypse? And we did an episode about that. And are you ready for these things? And do you have a plan? And I think that's one of the biggest things about taking care of your money is, do you have a plan? Do you know what you're going to do? And have you communicated that plan with the people who are important to you?
Awesome. Barb, what about you? What are some of your kind of final thoughts here?
To be on the philosophical side, we need to realize that all of us, even you young folks out there, only have a limited amount of time. And, you're under 50, you feel like you've got, or maybe under 40, I don't know. All that is way in my past. You feel like you've got forever. But as you approach the second third of your life, you come to grips that you've got a limited amount of time. So what that implores you to do is take a step back. First of all, figure out, are you spending your time on the things that matter most to you, that are going to make a biggest impact in your life? And recognize you're going to have to let a lot of stuff go, and that's okay. You're also going to have to realize life is uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. So you make the best choices you can now. Be that like, I love Miranda's summary, her life and money summary, which is, diversify and keep saving and investing. Well, duh. Okay.
It's one of those simple, right, what do they say? It's simple, but not always easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But it's not all about the money, it's about the time. And I think our guest elaborated on that a lot. So get your stuff in order. Don't beat yourself up about what you're not doing. Use the podcast, the information, the news, the resources that you get here to help you live a little bit of a better life, to be a little more financially smart. So I am Barbara Friedberg. You can find me at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance, Robo Advisor Pros, and on my YouTube channel and right here.
Well, thanks for coming on, Barb. Doug, final thoughts from you?
Yeah, so one thing I didn't stay. I mean, I went through this when my father passed away unexpectedly. I was 25 years old. He was 53. It was a lot of work to get everything together in a state. And, there was a lot of stuff that he had. There's some stuff I found out that was incredibly valuable that he had that I didn't know till after the fact. But again, I didn't have the time. I was balancing life. I was balancing work, family, and just trying to figure out how to get through this stuff. This is state prep. So there's two sides of what came out today. One is the people that are there just trying to find the kind of the American pickers, find it cheap and sell it. Listen, again, we talked about George Carlin. If I could tell anybody to go out and find another clip, he has a clip about stuff and how he talks about how we take our stuff and then we go somewhere and we bring our bag of stuff and then we go somewhere else and then we bring that little bag of, I forget exactly how it goes. It's hysterical, but that's where we are, collectors of stuff. We are, Americans, they call it the American consumer. All we do is consume. And that ends up, storage units are full of stuff that people will never see for years, right? And so, but they continue to pay rent on it. There's that new show out on Netflix about this, How to Get Rich. He talking about this guy's been paying $350 a month on a storage unit he never goes into for years. So if you've got, if you can proactively, it's hard to deal with this from an estate planning standpoint. If you can proactively go through this and get this stuff organized over a long term and have it ready, it's going to be tremendously helpful for your family. I went through this personally. And if you're trying to just do this in collecting and arbitrage, that's a whole different beast. That's speculation. And again, if it's your business, wonderful. Those are kind of my thoughts on it. I think there's some value there, but I think you need to there's some planning for estate, but also, you know, there's investment opportunity, but you really need to know what you're getting into. And again, do you have the space to store it all? Listen, I want to just talk real quickly for business owners that are listening and you're trying to think, how am I going to be profitable in this new economy? With a lot of the changes going on. Really simply go out to automaticbusinessmethod.com, download our free checklist, the 9-step process that, you know, to help you run your business more efficiently, have it thrive without you. Automaticbusinessmethod.com, free checklist. Go there now.
Great. Well, thanks, Doug. And final thank you for Miranda, as Miranda was the pioneer for this show. She was the one with all the arrows in her back for going first. So special thanks for Miranda for you know, for making the show what it is and bringing us to this point. So thanks a lot, Miranda.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It was fun to be on, and yeah, here's to 500 more.
Here's to 500 more.
You're like, do I have to?
That's intimidating. You just overwhelmed me, Miranda. 500 more. It was tough getting this point, but it's a passion. It's a labor of love, as they say. It's a passion. I think we're all here. We're not here for the paycheck, because there isn't one. So, you know, we're all here to help and to make the world a better place. So appreciate.
Kirk, it's a labor of love, as my son would say. Okay?
Yeah, so thanks all of you for helping panel the show and for helping making the show what it is. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, wealth manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com, and of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.